Hello there, Brick Fanatics. What a brilliant one we have for you today, because the LEGO Van Gogh Sunflowers is just absolutely exquisite. This is how you do an adaptation of a famous artistic work. I hope you like my Van Gogh hat. What's that, one-piece hat? No, it's a completely different hat. Anyway, I'm taking it off because it is yet again very, very hot in it. Now, I am something of an apologist for LEGO Mona Lisa. I think that it is better than a lot of people give it credit for. I think that it does struggle with showing definition and features and some of the finer brush strokes of the original, but otherwise I do think that it is a fairly solid adaptation of a painting. That said, it's gotta be said, these sunflowers, they're just so good. This is such a well-designed LEGO set. I said in my review for Mona Lisa that one of the challenges with LEGO is that the bricks are often too big to be able to show off the defined tiny little brushstrokes, and I did point to the Starry Night LEGO Ideas set as another example of how difficult it is to really capture a lot of those finer brushstrokes in LEGO form. And yet somehow with Sunflowers here, the LEGO designers have just knocked it out of the park. They've just done such a spectacular job of converting some very, very fine details into LEGO form in a way that feels absolutely recognizable as the exact painting that it is supposed to be, while also just brimming with color and joy. They've done such a great job of adapting the bright yellows of the original painting into LEGO form, and they've really just nailed it. I am so impressed. Now, the fun thing about this particular LEGO set is that you may have guessed it now, it is time for a history lesson. Yay! And this one is particularly exciting because it is such a positive story. Because yes, we've done the endurance in the past and the tragedy that then turned into a story of actual endurance. And then we did the love sign and the love sculpture and how that was born initially of heartbreak and of sadness. But now that we're doing a story on Vincent van Gogh, we get to do the history of a painting which is all about love, both for friends and for family, and optimism and hope and joy. And that's possibly not what you were expecting for a story about Vincent van Gogh. So Van Gogh has something of a reputation for being a bit sad, I think, to understate it somewhat. If you look at the other LEGO Van Gogh set, Starry Night was painted when Van Gogh was in a mental hospital as part of his therapy, because while he was there, he was so desperate to paint that he would be like stealing tea towels out of the kitchen and turning them into canvases so he could just paint on them, because he needed to paint. It was so important to him, just because that was how he lived. He just loved to paint so much, and the doctor very quickly recognized, oh, that's actually really good therapy for this guy, so just let him do his painting, just let him do whatever. And the view in that painting is the view that he had from the hospital, and so for a lot of people, they interpret this painting as being about how there was this sadness and this darkness and this pain within Van Gogh, and he turned it into something beautiful. And that informs a lot of what people think about when they think of Van Gogh. They think of a tortured, friendless, lonely artist who had nothing going on in his life. Everybody hated him, no one liked his paintings, no one would buy any of his stuff, and ultimately he lived a sad, miserable existence and then died, and it was only after that that people started to actually appreciate his paintings. And they get a lot of that from the fact that he spent so much time in mental hospitals and the fact that he had these mental health issues. I'm not going to say that Van Gogh did not have mental health issues during his life, but during the period that he was painting his sunflower pictures, his outlook was completely different, because sometimes in life you have periods of health and you have periods of sickness, and he was relatively very healthy when he was painting these sunflowers, and he was actually very optimistic and happy about his chances, not just as an artist, but within his circle of friends, because he did actually have a lot of friends. But okay, I want to rewind just a little bit. Why was Van Gogh's style, first off, not quite what people were looking for at the time, and second off, very much what people were looking for immediately after his death? The Impressionist artistic movement came about for one very specific reason: the invention of the camera obscura. For centuries prior to the invention of the camera, artists were primarily tasked with creating the most realistic portraits that they possibly could. If you were a particularly wealthy person, you could commission an artist to paint you, and you would have a permanent copy of your face. And that was something that was very much a status symbol, and so a lot of artists made their living by making these paintings. And then suddenly the camera comes along, and instead of of having to hire an artist for hours and hours and hours, you can get the whole thing done relatively quickly with the click of a button. Admittedly, it wasn't just the click of a button at the time, it was a very long session in order to fully expose the negatives, but at the same time it was significantly quicker and significantly easier and significantly cheaper than having a portrait commissioned and actually painted. I think of it as being not entirely dissimilar to the discussion that is going on around the world at the moment with regards to generative AI, because it was a similar kind of thing where something that was hours and hours of work previously could be done very quickly, but the result was often, it felt a little bit soulless and it felt a little bit like it was lacking something. And so the kinds of debates that we see around generative AI now were the kinds of debates that they were having around the camera all the way back then. But the thing is, artists weren't just going to lie down and give up because something had been invented that could do their job quicker. Impressionism then is a direct response to the existence of the camera. Okay, people don't want really realistic paintings anymore. What can we do that cameras can't do? We can do expression. We can do the blurring of the lines between fantasy and reality. We can show how things feel rather than how things look. And so that's why you get all of these wonderful blurs in Impressionist paintings, because they're showing how things look through the eye and how things look through the soul, I guess you could say, rather than through a camera lens, which is very fixed and will just give you exactly what something looks like in the real world. You also get wonderful experimentations with colour, because the camera back then couldn't do colour. It was only black and white, and so that's why a lot of Impressionists used a bunch of colours which are over the top and exaggerated and bright and wonderful and spectacularly pretty in their own right. And so you get a guy like Van Gogh, who started out doing more traditional, more realistic paintings, and over the course of his artistic journey experiments more and more with just making stuff a little bit more fun and a little bit more colourful and a little bit less rigid and a little bit less fixed to reality. It is no wonder that these paintings ended up being a big hit in the age of the camera, but it's also no wonder that at the start, as Impressionism was starting, a lot of the traditional artistic bodies of the world looked at it with a little bit of disdain. They said, oh, well, that's not what we've been doing for the past 100 years, so it must be just weird and wrong, and we don't like it. And so you get a kind of environment where Impressionism needs to build up momentum before people really start taking it seriously. Luckily, there were plenty of people at the time who did absolutely love this emerging art style, and there were a lot of other artists at around the same time as Van Gogh who were contemporaries of him who were also exploring Impressionism and other similar kind of bold and expressive forms of art. Van Gogh was not without peer, and he had a lot of friends in the art world. In fact, at one point in his life, he wanted to set up his home as a kind of studio for a bunch of his fellow artists, people that he really admired, his friends, who were constantly sharing paintings back and forth and were expressing themselves and were sharing ideas. And he wanted to have a kind of a hub for everybody to live together. And that was something that he was working towards as he was doing a lot of his sunflower pictures. Because in case you're not aware, there's not just one sunflower picture. Van Gogh painted one and he liked it, and so he painted some more, and some other people said, oh, we like that, and so he painted some more. In fact, the sunflower painting that we see adapted into Lego form, which is potentially the most famous of these sunflower paintings, Van Gogh actually painted for a friend of his, Paul Gauguin. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. I've probably not, but then I'm probably also not pronouncing Van Gogh correctly, so we'll just roll with it. Gauguin was an artist with a very similar style to Van Gogh, relatively speaking, at the time, and the two of them did stay together for a while when Gauguin came to visit Van Gogh, and they spent some time painting each other and painting pictures for each other, and one of them was this sunflower, because Gauguin had said that he felt like that was the quintessential, perfect Vincent van Gogh style. He was really, really taken with it. So this idea that Van Gogh painted a load of paintings and that no one liked them and that everybody said, oh, that's horrible, that is complete bunk, because actually he had a bunch of friends who really liked his artwork, and they had a really good time sharing these paintings together. What's more, there are two other people who loved Vincent dearly, who are absolutely part of the reason why we know him as an artist today, and who loved his sunflower pictures. Vincent's brother Theo and Theo's wife Johanna. Theo loved his brother deeply and was so supportive of him. In fact, he was financially supportive of him for a lot of his life. He paid for Vincent's medical treatments, he paid for Vincent's living costs, and he paid for Vincent's art supplies, all very important, and he genuinely encouraged his brother to continue pursuing art. Theo died not long after his brother, and his dying wish on his deathbed for his wife Johanna was, look after our children and help them to grow up, and get people to see Vincent's paintings. This was so important to him. And to her credit, Johanna took that mission and ran with it. And if you imagine being a woman in the 1800s, being a widow in the 1800s, having no formal art education whatsoever, she was really fighting an uphill battle to get anyone significant to look at these paintings. Now, it is also not true, by the way, that Vincent had no interest from the art world whatsoever in his paintings during his life. There were people who were interested in his art, and he was something of a rising star. He was getting there. It was taking time, and he didn't have enough time, ultimately, to get to the level that one would expect of a successful painter, but he was definitely moving in the right direction. A lot of that died off when he, unfortunately, died, and so Johanna was then trying to reignite this flame and getting people to reevaluate these paintings and look at them and say, look at these wonderful things that have been made by this man. And so for a lot of that, in order to really sell that, she knew the importance of the story and of talking about an artist who was underappreciated in his own life, but who then gained a larger following in death. And so she really bigged up that story, and I think that kind of snowballed, and Van Gogh in the public consciousness got a bit Flandersized in that he just kind of got distilled down into this sad, mentally ill man who was painting in his tortured state in order to suffer for his art, which is absolutely not the case for what the man was actually like, because it turns out that a human being is more complicated than a one-sentence summary. This all worked out very well for Johanna, who actually managed to convince people to put on galleries for this art, and suddenly these paintings rose in value significantly, and she had an enormous stockpile of basically all the Vincent van Gogh paintings that were now worth an awful lot of money. So well done to her, very deserved. But all of this, I hope, communicates to you the fact that the sunflower picture is not a picture of a tortured artist who is suffering for his art. It is a painting that was done by a very happy and enthusiastic man who was loved by his friends and by his family, and who felt optimistic and hopeful for the future. Now, of course, over the course of a person's life, there are going to be periods of health and periods of ill health. And Vincent van Gogh, at the time that he painted these sunflowers, was in a relatively good and happy state. And I do think that that is so important to understanding this picture. So if you are going to be making this Lego set and putting it on your wall, I want you to just bear in mind, this was Vincent van Gogh at possibly the happiest in his life. And as said, I do absolutely love this adaptation into Lego form. It is so impressive. I really love, for example, how the designers have used these wedge plates along the bottom of the base of the sunflower pot in order to show kind of a thickening and thinning of lines, this variance in thickness, which you get in the actual Van Gogh painting, but which is very difficult normally to communicate in Lego form. I also think that all of these sunflowers are just brilliant. They look just like the real thing. They're so bright and round and filled with life and filled with detail. It's not easy to get this kind of texture in a Lego set, and as said, some other adaptations of paintings that the Lego group has produced recently haven't quite managed to nail it this well. I would argue that this one does a far better job even than the Lego Ideas Starry Night set at actually communicating things without having to resort to big old printed tiles, or without having to resort to turning bricks on their side in order to be able to get slightly finer lines. Like, it's really impressive how well the designers have put this together, and I think that it absolutely sings as a result. So then, that is that. Hopefully you have learned a little bit about the history of Vincent van Gogh, and hopefully you have a greater appreciation for this Lego set. But what do you think of it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, make sure that you do all of the rest of the YouTube things. You know the drill by now. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hit the thumbs up button so that we get a little bit of a slight boost in the YouTube algorithm. Now, do make sure that if you are going to be purchasing any Lego from the Lego website in the near future, that you use the affiliate link, which is down in the description, or the QR code that is currently on screen. They take you straight to the Lego website. We get a little bit of the percentage of the sale when you make a purchase through those links. Doesn't cost you a penny extra, but it helps keep the lights on at Brick Fanatics. Otherwise, do make sure that you go to brickfanatics.com for all coverage of all things Lego, and make sure that you sign up to our newsletter so that you never miss anything Lego related ever again. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.